Hello and welcome to Divorce TV. I'm Suzy Miller, your divorce strategist, and I have a fantastic gang here today to talk about better ways to divorce and taking a more holistic approach. We have divorce reinvention queen Zina Arinze.
Hello.
We have Kirsty Cox, who is going to be telling us about the F word.
Hello.
She's a finance specialist. We have Liz Hancock, who helps people heal through emotional freedom technique. You'll hear more about that later. We have Mihaela Berciu, who works in conflict resolution, and Anneth, Bryan, who is part of the restorative justice, which I'm looking forward to hearing more about later.
Hello.
So to start with, I wanted to talk about Christmas Day. On Christmas Day in the UK, apparently 13 people filed for divorce online. So my question is, what is the best time to divorce? And I know that financially it can make a big difference on timing, can't it, Kirsty?
Yes, it can. And I guess there never is a good time, of course. And it can certainly make a difference with your finances from a tax point of view. There will be some timings which are better here in the UK than there are overseas, and there's been some quite high profile news recently of somebody divorcing who's quite wealthy. So it all rolls back to having a plan and really thinking about the holistic picture and the planning that's attached to that, and taking control of all elements of that, and whether that's kind of for now or in the future, and looking at those assets and what that plan is really made up of.
So things like capital gains tax, for example, there's issues around when someone leaves the house, where their tax year ends and begins, the transferring of funds. So these are things that they basically need to get financial advice when you're starting to even begin to think about divorce.
Without question. And take control of that situation, and don't be afraid to have that conversation with a professional or specialist. Absolutely.
And not putting down lawyers who have a certain amount of financial knowledge, would you say that if you want to talk about the finances, it's a good idea to actually speak to a financial expert?
Yes. Yes, without question. And I have a scenario very recently where a client, she had a settlement, it worked very well for the short term, but actually roll on 5 years, she's now having to downsize for the second time. So speak to a financial advisor, have a conversation with somebody who will take you on that holistic journey and work with you to build that plan. And it can be a very comforting, friendly conversation. It doesn't need to be a conversation that you need to feel intimidated by. It's just having a very open and frank conversation with somebody who can help and guide you to not only help you frame that for the now, but for the next 5 years and for the next 10 years, and considering what might happen with children, careers, businesses. So it's just taking that entire approach to your journey and build a plan with somebody who can support you in that.
And with timings for divorce, some people think, you should wait till the children go to university. That's often a common thing, and I've read that's apparently the worst time you can divorce, especially if the children had no idea there was anything wrong. So you can't always choose, though, can you, when to divorce? So from a healing perspective, you can help the couple or the individuals to deal with the stress and trauma of divorce, but what about their children? Is there a way that they can also help their children using the techniques that you offer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is no, like we said just now, there is no good time to divorce. But waiting until university, you might think, well, it's less unsettling for them because they're not at home all the time. But I actually had a client, a young man, who his father left when he was 16 or 18, I think he was just doing his A-levels. And he felt like his whole childhood had been a lie because his dad had told him, I would have left 10 years ago, but I stayed because of you. So he also had that guilt on his shoulders. So we might think we're sacrificing ourselves by staying, but that's not necessarily the right thing. I think you're always going to mess up your kids whenever you do it, let's be frank.
There's always going to be an impact.
Exactly, there's always going to be an impact, and we just need to think about damage limitation and communication, and not just getting help for your children. I think there should be more child counsellors in schools. I think that's really, really essential. But also help for yourself in terms of how you're feeling, your guilt as a mother or as a father, whosever fault it is, just really healing yourself so you can be in the best place to help your children.
And with EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, is that something that can help with guilt?
Oh, massively, yeah, totally. And I think a lot of emotional stuff that comes up through divorce, it will take you, and you might not even realise it's doing this, it will take you straight back to your own childhood and unhealed wounds from there. So potentially you might really need to do some deep work.
Yeah.
And actually that's amazing. That's the work I love to do because it's so impactful.
And with coaching, with the work that you do through coaching, again, do you find that the timing of divorce has any impact on, or does it at the end of the day, is it just about this is the situation, how to look forward? Because obviously a lot of what you're doing is helping people to look forward.
Yes, I think the most important thing is not to make an emotional decision, and this is where I come in. You help people to make wise decisions. You look, like my colleague said here, Kirsty, you help people to make wise financial decisions because you're thinking about your future. Yes, the marriage might have failed, and I don't like the word failure, but the marriage might have not have worked, but it is what it is, and you have to move forward. But if you don't actually think about now, the future's not going to be any better. And so it's important that you don't say, well, I'm going to deal with him, I'm going to get the house, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I've given him the best 10 years of my life, and all that, many women like to say. And then you make decisions from the hip. So you decide to either go and take out a massive loan, or you decide to, I'm going to, I had a client who emptied the joint account, and when it came to settlement, there was no money for her, or and they spent so much time in court, trying to deal with this. 3-4 years, they were both broke. One had to go bankrupt just because you made an emotional decision. And I know it's difficult. You might be saying, well, you don't understand what I've gone through, Zina. I do. And I think it's really important as well that you plan. If you say, you said 13 people on Christmas Day filed for divorce, I'll hedge my bets that most of them didn't plan. It was, they looked under the Christmas tree, just like Love Actually, and they didn't get the diamond ring or the brooch or whatever it was, and they went, where is that present? And it's gone to someone else, and so, yes, I've had it. I'm filing for divorce.
And they're making, as you said, an emotional decision. And with the work that you do with restorative justice and you with the conflict resolution, the timing of a divorce, what would you like to say? Perhaps you'd like to start, Anneth, about if you're in an emotional, traumatised, very angry state, that's obviously going to affect how well it's going to work.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me quite nicely onto the word harm that hasn't actually been mentioned just yet. In restorative practice work, and in this field it would be called restorative mediation, we look at the impact of the harm that's being caused and also the best interest of the children, because sometimes we can get so embroiled with the anger and the emotions and so forth, and we forget actually there's other people and the effect on others. So as everybody else has already said, it is about the future. It is about helping people to cope with what's happening for them right now, to come together and have a real candid conversation in a facilitated way about the things that they can do now, the things that perhaps they might need to put off until later, and actually looking at beyond themselves. So it's the effect on the whole family rather than just for them and what's going on at the moment. But also the outcome of restorative practice is about looking at a positive way forward, whereas most divorces will end in very bitter senses, but we try to support people to end it in a positive way so that both people can move on for their futures. And you mentioned about women in particular, but there are quite a lot of men that are actually the bearers of the negative woman and the toxic attitudes and things as well. So we need to keep that quite open as well in our thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Mihaela, in your experience with conflict resolution, what would you like to share with us on the timing issue?
Well, I think the whole problem with relationships and, when they come to an end, it's all about expectations. Because we set this, huge expectation about a relationship that is supposed to last forever, about the other person who's supposed to become our best friend, our partner, our everything. And we don't really have enough conversations during the marriage about how things are going, how our expectations are being met, why we have them, where do all those, huge expectations come from. We also have, the family and friends around us who tend to unload their failed expectations on us, who tend to point out mostly the negative things about the other one, and also is the fact that we too carry our own faults. When we finally decide there is no way of saving this relationship anymore, but even then, if we take the time, man or woman, doesn't matter, to understand, okay, so it's coming to an end. What are my expectations? How I would like this to go forward? And don't forget, at one point you actually loved the other one, so trying to remember the beginning of the journey, it actually helps the end of it. Mostly, if there is one advice I give my clients is don't listen to anyone and don't talk to anyone about what you're going through, because all they'll do is fuel negativity and fuel your anger. Transferring it onto someone else, it's exactly like using gasoline, to set it on a fire. So, it's with patience, with calm, and with the right expectations, which of course takes into account planning, it takes healing, it takes everything. But with doing the right steps and maintaining that calmness and that clear vision of what you want to get out of it, without the negativity in get, because it's not about getting the other one, it's about making it, you actually end up with a lot more completeness that will not burden you later on and will not affect your mental health.
So taking a holistic approach, working with a range of professionals, is putting in a fantastic foundation long term, isn't it? Not just for co-parenting, but for your own life.
Yeah. And it ends up being less expensive than it would be, which lots of people fear that, I don't want to pay all these people, but it's actually gonna cost you less and gain you more if you speak to those who are not emotionally involved, because that's the key. Anyone at this table working with someone going through a divorce, we have zero emotional implications, so we can see things clearly, and we can be the bumper between you lashing out and you staying composed and focused.
And what's interesting is around this table now on Divorce TV, we do not have a single divorce mediator and we do not have a single family lawyer, which means two things to me. One is, as we've been saying, a holistic approach is really important, and part of our mission is to educate people who are going through divorce to not just think, I need to talk to a mediator or a lawyer. As important as those roles are, there's more and other useful people that you should engage with, because it will save you money, it will save you stress, and ultimately will give you a much better foundation for your co-parenting relationship going forwards. But the other point I'd like to make is there's plenty of mediators and lawyers who speak to me face to face about how they believe that the family law system needs a bit of work, a bit of a revolution really, but they tend not to speak out. We have exceptions like Berciu and Hickey, who was on this show not long ago, and she's very happy to, as a collaborative lawyer, to express the failings of the family law system and the kind of things that could make things better going forwards. But there's just too few of other people in that profession who are doing the same. So I do invite mediators and lawyers who are watching this programme to come on, because most of the interviews I've got lined up with lawyers are American, so we don't want them getting ahead of us on this. So come and join us and be part of this conversation. But talking about that holistic approach, we've got I want to talk about a little bit about Mediation Week, which happened towards the end of January. And that's a great thing, a whole week dedicated to raising awareness about mediation. But as we've been discussing here, there's perhaps a little bit of work people need to do to prepare themselves for mediation and any form of dispute resolution, to be ready to access it in the best possible way. So just briefly, I'd like to ask everyone what it is that you do that specifically helps people access mediation, collaborative law, any form of dispute resolution more successfully than they would if they just wandered up and didn't do any kind of preparation at all. So Zina, perhaps just briefly.
And the kind of thing that I do is I work with my clients and, saying, what do you want? I like what you mentioned earlier on about expectations. What do you want? And we have that conversation. Well, I want this, I want that. Well, let's talk about what you really want, not what you want angrily. And, give us some advice on that. So, well, if you want the house, or if you want the children, or if you want, a co-parenting relationship, oh yeah, but I only want him to have the children. No. It has to be something where you meet midway. So have that conversation now, so that you don't end up going to the mediator and the relationship falls down before you even start. I have had situations where both parties have gone to the mediator. One particular client asked her partner, so you haven't been a very good dad. What do you think about that? And obviously everything fell apart. So it's about having that conversation and saying, don't be blamed. The marriage has failed. Don't blame your partner and say, you've done this, you've done. Let's look at a way that we can do this together for the benefit of the children or for the benefit of our property, asset, whatever. Ask them to have a pro forma and ask them some questions, so what are your expectations? Okay, what do you think is reasonable? If you were on the other side, how would you feel if oh God, I haven't thought about it like that. So it's about, flipping the shoe on the other side, on the other foot, and say, okay, if you were the other partner, how would you feel about this? Would you be ready to give that, have that kind of more realistic approach to what you can discuss and what you can potentially get, and I don't like the word get either, just like you, but what you can potentially
agree on,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then that makes the mediation process much more favourable to both parties
and more likely to work.
Yeah.
To be blunt, I mean, I do feel very strongly that you need to help couples to be prepared.
Yes.
to make these modalities work. So Kirsty, in what way do you help couples have more success using dispute resolution?
So exactly that, and the key thing I think around the table is it's taking control. Unfortunately, it's not going to change, so you have to embrace it. So let's look at the short term, the medium, and then the long term. So take control of that situation, but also think about timing. So think about the timing when you engage the professional. So don't burn through your free solicitor session. Go after having a conversation with somebody like me or one of my colleagues around the table. So it's take control, it's timing, and if I had a wish list, I'd like to be a little pixie that visits everybody when they get together before they get married, to then have a conversation around, okay, so it's great now, and then what happens when children come along? What happens when you buy a home? And then what happens if 10 years down the line, perhaps you're not together, or perhaps somebody's working overseas? So what does that plan look like then? So I'd like to have more people speaking about what's the plan B if it doesn't work out, because it's very rosy and wonderful now, but let's just talk about if it didn't, who would have what, how would that work out, how would we deal with that between us?
And I think when people face up to the statistical likelihood, let's face it, it's a high statistical chance that your family is going to change form over a period of years.
Absolutely.
So the more that we're braver about having those financial conversations, which are actually really interesting and empowering, but we do have a kind of a social issue around
and don't
that.
leave it until you're 50, have that conversation. There's big stuff happening in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s. Too many people leave it down here, and actually I'm speaking to so many wonderful women that haven't made a plan for their financial future, and they're now single. So let's have those conversations, front load them. Let's do it down here.
Get the kids. As soon as they've got a part-time job, they should be talking to you. Liz, with the healing aspect, obviously that can have a massive impact on the psychological state and emotional state someone's in when they're going to start cutting a deal, perhaps through mediation. or even just going as a couple to work with a financial planner, or even coming to work with a coach, what kind of things can you help them with?
For me, it comes down to two main words, which is which is acceptance and grace. And I think whether it's whoever is the wronged party, you've got to accept the situation. And it's very easy to say that, but actually if you don't really accept it in here, all the mediation isn't going to work. It's just going to be a big, awful, terrible experience. And it's not just saying about, well, you just have to accept it. It's about really healing from the inside out and voicing that hurt and that emotion and all the anger you feel and everything, and just having someone listen to that and get it all out, and probably a number of times. And
how is the work that you do different from spilling out your emotions to a psychotherapist, for example?
So what I do, it's not just talk therapy and coaching, that is in there, but I actually use energy techniques, which use the mind-body connection. And if anyone denies that's not there, then just think about if you embarrass yourself and you actually feel physically flushed rather, you might get a rash, or your heart rate increases. There's a massive link between the physical and the emotional, and so it's working on the way the body reacts, which then feeds the emotions and feeds how you react to situations. So it's all about tapping into that. Literally, I won't go into how I do it like physically, but it's just so powerful, as well as the talking and the coaching. I think really just addressing that. And
working very much on a deeper level.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And Mihaela, how does someone working with you, how is that going to make a difference to them?
Well, my focus is on helping my clients understand how the three main negative emotions impact them, and that's shame, guilt, and frustration. And they all come from certain emotional blockages and failed expectations. They're never helpful, and they once you understand where they're coming from and why they are affecting you, then you can release them. And once their grip, you're out of their grip, then you're not triggered anymore. Because whatever triggers us it comes down to these three negative emotions. And when you're free of them, then you can have a very calm, open and reasonable conversation with anyone.
And I suppose in practical terms, sometimes people are frightened in mediation to be in the same room as that person because of the emotional triggers. By mastering that, they can be in that same room, and then they can have that conversation. So in a very practical way.
And the interesting thing is that the other side is not necessarily aware of the process, the other one is going through. So when they go into that meeting, they are very, they expect, and they go with the mindset, oh, I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna smash you, I'm gonna get you, because I know her or I know him. If I say this, he'll flip, or if I do this, she'll go mad, and then I'll use that to my advantage. But by doing this work, then whatever the other one says, that anger and that all of that is theirs, it's not yours. So you can welcome whatever comes your way with a smile.
And not taking it personally.
Exactly, because you're detached, which of course at first drives the other one nuts.
They're not reacting like
no, exactly. So the intensity, will raise and can get, quite a bit nastier. But if you are able to maintain your calm and your sort of distance from all of what's going there. Then they calm down, and then eventually you can actually have a really good conversation.
Trust starts to build, doesn't it? It's a new relationship, I think, begins to form. Exactly. But you have to have those skill sets. And perhaps a little bit more about restorative justice itself, because for a lot of
Sure.
people we know the words, but we don't really know what it means, and how you're, really at the forefront of campaigning to bring this more into the family law realms.
Yeah, I think it's a big missed opportunity in this particular arena, because restorative justice obviously looks at crime, but in this context it's looking at harm and repairing the harm. The idea is about repairing the harm. So in conventional mediation cases, what happens, people are very positional. So it's, I'm not moving position because I think I should get, or this person's not moving position because they think they should get. What we try to do is remove that position and take it from the premise of actually accepting responsibility for your portion. Accepting responsibility because you brought yourself into this, and you now need to be responsible to bring yourself out. How we help you to do that, or how I help clients do that, is by looking at three things. Firstly, preparation. You talked about them being very angry, they've got all this emotion and lots of trauma and so forth going on, especially if there's a lot to lose within a marriage. So we take that away and we say, actually, let's look at the impact. Who's going to be affected by what you did, by what you said. And we do that by using a process of restorative questions. And those questions really are 5 very simple questions. First one being, well, what happened? Where and how did you get to this particular place? And it's supporting that person through preparation to take them right back to that very beginning point, to be candid, to address it and actually take responsibility for their part. So that takes some time to actually get them there.
And can I ask, with because we've spoken in the past about this, that there are many situations with mediation it can't happen. We can't have the mediation because you've only got one person who's ready. And the mediator can't reach out and go and talk to the ex or to be ex, because that's not their role. They're completely impartial. They're kind of waiting for when you arrive in the room. There's very little they can do apart from have a helpful conversation. But do you feel there's a role for you in restorative justice to be the one who reaches out? Because obviously you do that a lot as part of the criminal
absolutely.
work.
The process has tenets to it. Of course, it has to be voluntary. However, when we can show both sides that they are both going to benefit, especially when there are children involved, a lot of finances and so forth, people that I've already spoken to about using restorative approach as an alternative have been very welcoming, because they say that if they take responsibility for what their actions are, and I take that to the other party, they're more likely to be open and listen. So it works, it does work, but people need to see it being more used in this particular arena.
And also for fathers who tragically are not able to spend time with their children, who've become weapons of this war, do you feel there's a role there as well?
Absolutely. I'm dealing with a case at the moment where it's the father who's being ostracised and not being able to see his children. The ex-wife is holding on to items, and it's been long-standing for about 4 years. So we've gone down the conventional route, gone through the court process, got the police involved. It's not working. She's very positional and she purposely wishes to cause harm. So my role is to try to engage with her to see what she's doing is not only damaging to herself, firstly, because obviously she's holding that position, it's causing her a lot of internal damage, but equally it's how do you want your children to see and view you, and how the relationship was very strong previously. What's the future long-term implications of your actions? So that's what we home in on. We home in on the harm that you're causing, not only to yourself, but to others who are being impacted, which are the children, the friends and family around you. And then we talk about, well, what do you really want this to look like going forward? Do you want to continue to be seen as, the bad one, so to speak? Or would you like to change that? Would you like to change it? And through the process of, restorative approaches, it is about how to help people cope with what's gone on for them, recover and move on.
Fantastic. And to round off, just a couple of horror stories. I was reading about this chap. Please don't do this at home. He was very angry. I shouldn't be laughing because it's horrible. He was very angry that he'd lost the house in the divorce, which presumably was for the children. But in his mindset, his positioning was that he'd lost this house. So he was very angry about this. So he, before sending the deeds to his now ex-wife, he burnt the house down out of vengeance. And then another story, I think it was in India, there was a gentleman, and obviously it could be the other way around too, but this particular case, the gentleman was very upset about the amount of interim spousal maintenance he had to pay. So he quite legally brought the money to the court, and but he did it in single coins, and there were a lot of them. So he emptied them out in the court, and he was the owner of the bag, so legally he could take the bags away. So his wife has left this massive pile of coins and no way to take it home. So my question is that in a world where I hope that one day we do have a government ministry of peace to oversee the transformation, revolution of the family law system, what way, small or large, would you like to suggest that could make a real difference to reducing the vengeance that seems to become exhibited through the divorce process?
I think, one way really is, like you said, to seek peace. There's a fantastic saying in a book that says, seek peace with all men. In all that you do, seek peace, pursue peace. And I know that the more you seek peace in whatever you do, whether it's divorce, whether it's at work, the more you're at peace with yourself. Because quite frankly, when you're going through a divorce and it's very confrontational and you're very angry, what typically happens is that you might, take out anger on the children or on your ex-spouse, but it also affects you. You're kind of hunched. You might not see, but you're kind of walking about like this. You probably see this in your experience. You're hunched, you're angry, you can't function, you can't sleep well. You don't actually realise it, but you're actually shortening your lifespan. So you might be thinking that you're walking in anger with someone else, but you're really harming yourself.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day,
Often vengeance is it may be sweet, but often very like eating a nice bar of chocolate.
Yeah,
It's gone.
sure.
it's gone.
And then you're often the only one then
Yes.
suffering. So thank you for that. What about you, Kirsty?
I think from my side, on the finance side of things, it would definitely be around preparation, and back to my prenup pixie, where it's kind of front loading it. It's having the conversation around finances and what could happen if it didn't go according to plan. So I think mine would be being proactive around the situation if it didn't work out as you anticipated, and having a plan in place to support that.
And I personally believe that you shouldn't get married or have children without having a state-funded opportunity to sit down with a financial planner and to look forward and work with a coach, because I think the combination is very is key.
And the church and the Catholic Church, it's very
They had doing a good thing there, but I think as a state we should be doing. What about you?
For me, again, it comes back to grace and how. Yes, well, let's use the chocolate bar analogy. I love chocolate. I had Mars bar on the way here for breakfast. And will I feel good about it later? Probably not. I'll beat myself up about it. But I won't, because I have this great technique that I use that stops me doing that. I'll show you all later. But I think, yes, it feels good in the moment, and yes, it is good to get your anger out, and you'll probably want to hurl bricks at the person that's, pulled you over the coals. But how do you want to look back? What do you want to look back on, especially if children are involved? My sister-in-law's gone through a divorce, and she's done it so amazingly, and her kids are in awe of her, and as is everyone that knows her. It's just she's just been able to go through it with her head held high, and it actually makes me quite emotional. The children are they've just been cared for so well. And I think anyone that goes through something like that, use her as an example, look back and be able to look back with your head held really high, knowing that you've done the best thing you possibly could in really hard circumstances, but you've done the best that you could.
Thank you. And what would you say, if we're going to reform the whole system, what kind of changes would you make that would reduce the likelihood of vengeance playing a role?
Well, I would go, good few years back, and I would have programs for younger adults, or ideally teenagers, if possible, to